Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm talking about the next set of G.I. Joe comics, which is collectively referred to as the Cobra Civil War. Now, these issues of the comic were written, like all others, by Larry Hama. And these, like most of them from the time, are drawn by Juan Ragnar. But there's also a couple issues mixed in here that are drawn by Marshall Rogers. And just between me and you, I prefer Marshall Rogers' art vastly over Ron Wagner's. If the name Marshall Rogers sounds familiar to you, it's probably because he drew a lot of the earlier issues of G.I. Joe. But yeah, let's see. This little story, which was released from June to October of 1988, basically chronicles the power vacuum of Cobra. The tensions between Serpentor and Fred Seven, the Crimson Guardsman, who's currently impersonating Cobra Commander. And Cobra Commander is being impersonated because he was going to leave the organization, spend time with his son, so he was shot and killed by a Crimson Guardsman. But yeah, so for now, Commander is dead, and Fred Seven is in his place. Destro, one of the other main Cobras, is off doing his own thing. He's got his own Scottish army of grenadiers. It's kind of cool. And then we also have the Dreadnoks, who are still in the comic for reasons unknown to basically anyone. And we also have the Baroness, who's kind of who was Destro's former girlfriend. So that's all the main players on the Cobra side. Over with the Joes, we're about to be introduced to a lot of new Joes. But the real main player of this story is General Hawk, who's kind of the main character of the G.I. Joe comic, especially at this time. Which is kind of weird since he's a general. This is a weird thing with the G.I. Joe comic where General Hawk really goes on an awful lot of missions. And it seems like he really shouldn't be doing all that, risking his life and whatnot. But yeah, so yeah, we're about to hop into our story today, which begins with Dr. Mindbender, the evil Cobra scientist, revealing a new type of android to be used by Serpentor, and he calls the android the Star Viper. And as Mindbender demonstrates the Star Viper's skills, he also says that he plans to send the Star Viper to investigate the G.I. Joe campus in Utah, and potentially gives Serpentor the edge over Cobra Commander and the Baroness in their quickly brewing quiet conflict. But we see that Cobra Commander and the Baroness are spying on Serpentor with a camera that they put in a battle android trooper. And we also see that they start getting a little intimate as they're watching. So the next day, we in Utah with the Joes, we see the Star Viper very briefly talk to a new unit of Joes and ask them for directions. So the Joes give him some directions to the nearest gas station, and then they drive off to the base where the Joes are set up. As the Joes check in, they are welcomed into the real base, which is located under the fort, the second pit. As Spirit gives the Joes the tour of Pit 2, we see that the Star Viper snuck in under the Desert Fox, one of the vehicles that the new Joes rode in on, and that the Star Viper has also snuck into the barracks. As the tour continues, we see Mainframe, the Joes' main tech guy, installing a little black box into their space shuttle, which translates all information that they receive from every spy satellite in the world. We then pan up and see that the Star Viper has seen the black box and that he wants it. So later, in the dead of night, the Star Viper jumps down and steals the black box. And he almost gets out scot-free, but as he walks through the barracks, he runs into Lady J and Flint, who are making out in the barracks. The Star Viper knocks them down real quick and then makes a break for it. But Flint is able to sound the alarm, so the Joes try to scramble some of their vehicles, but the Star Viper had already sabotaged the bay doors, so they can't roll out any of their armor. Then the Joes remember that they have the new vehicles that are still on the top level, and that those can be used to chase him down. So the Star Viper, who stole an Awe Striker, by the way, they have a whole little chase here, but the Star Viper is picked up in a semi that has a jet in the back. And the Joes blow up the semi, but the jet takes off just before the explosion. So the Star Viper gets away. And as the sun rises, we see a team of Joes investigating the scene, and they figure out that the Star Viper had hopped aboard the new Joe's vehicle as they drove past him on the side of the road. We then see a large plane with a lot of high-ranking military commanders on it. So Hawk goes to greet them, and he runs into one of his general friends, who lets him know that there are higher-ups in the government who want the Joes taken down, and that they're going to use the theft of the black box to get it done. So Hawk is advised to send a team of Joes to Cobra Island to get the black box back. In the Gulf, we see that the Star Viper has touched down on Cobra Island, and he's expecting some sort of celebration. But Cobra Commander and Serpentor are busy fighting. And things are starting to get serious. It's all getting a little bit shady. And all of the higher-ups of Cobra have been picking sides. When the Star Viper tries to break up the fight by giving Serpentor the black box, he is all but ignored. And the two groups of Cobra end up walking away from each other to regroup. In the ocean, we see that Hawk and a team of Joes are dropped off on the aircraft carrier, the USS Flag. We then learn that while Hawk is going to stay on the Flag with Flint, Lady J, and Mainframe, they are sending Lieutenant Falcon, Dial Tone, Spirit, Tunnel Rat, Sneak Peek, and Gung Ho to do some surveillance on Cobra Island in a stolen Mamba. Later that night, we see the two sects of Cobra have begun really fighting in interest as a true civil war breaks out. Serpentor is being forced towards an old oil tanker that's on the island, but Dr. Mindbender remembers that he still has the black box so he's going to try to strike a deal with the U.S. government. But Cobra Commander and Baroness see Dr. Mindbender's plan, and through the camera that they hidden in the bat, and they are very determined to destroy that helicopter, because Mindbender's taking off in a helicopter to get to the mainland. And as Cobra Commander scrambles some Mambas, he sends some pilots out after Mindbender. The Joes come flying in and distract the Mamba pilot, allowing Mindbender to escape. After a brief skirmish, the Cobra Mamba is destroyed, and the Joes recon team are dropped off on Cobra Island. We then see that Destro is also in the Gulf and preparing an army of his Iron Grenadiers. Back on the island, we see the Joes reporting that Baroness is fighting an uphill battle trying to get Serpentor out of the freighter, and that Baroness and Cobra Commander's numbers advantage is fading very fast. After the Joes give their report, they're ordered to go to the airfield and give a report on the defenses there. On the Flag, General Hollingsworth, Hawk's friend, touches down with a full company of Joes and explains to Hawk that the Joes are there to help Dr. Mindbender and Serpentor retake the island in return for the return of the black box. So the Joes are scrambled, and Hawk calls Lieutenant Falcon and gives him new orders that he has to take the air control tower no matter the cost. And we then see the entire Joe team fly out to Cobra Island. And Lieutenant Falcon's recon team begins to walk to the airfield through some open space, but Spear realizes that they're being followed. So he grabs the man following them, and the man reveals that he knows the secret way to the tower. So as the team of Joes on the Whale gives the signal, the recon team goes into the tunnel and begins to clear the tower. The Joes then begin dropping troops out of their tomahawks, but almost immediately one of them is destroyed, so the Joes have to get everyone out of the chopper before it blows up. We then see the team on the Whale go after the Aspen placements, where they take out about half of them before the Whale gets blown up. Next, we cut to the freighter, where we see that Serpentor has mounted up his tanks, leaving the Baroness trapped in no man's land. Back on the landing strip, we see that the Joes are holding their line while treating the wounded from the helicopter crash, But then we cut back to the asp emplacements where we see that the Joes destroy the final asps using some personal explosive devices so that their C-130 cargo planes are able to land and get most of the troops and armor out on the battlefield before Cobra Commander rolls up in the Thunder Machine, making Swiss cheese out of one of the planes and then kidnapping General Hawk before he sees Serpentor coming up with his Hiss battalion and with the Baroness strapped to the front. So as Cobra Commander tries to run, he runs straight into Destro's army, who have just arrived on the island. Cobra Commander tries to blast through Destro's tanks, the demons, but the Thunder Machine that he's riding around in just doesn't have the firepower, so it's shot up and flipped instead. Back with the main group of Joes, we see that Roadblock, Clutch, and Hawk go after Hawk, and the Awe-Striker, and they pick him up. We then see the Dreadnoks flip the Thunder Machine, and they drive away with Cobra Commander. The Joes then realize that they are completely surrounded with Destro's army to the south, Zartan and his new wave of Cobra vehicles on the east, Serpentor and his classics on the west, and a mountain to the north. And next, during a firefight between Serpentor and Zartan's tank battalions, we see that the injured Joes are being medically evac'd, and the Destro has decided to take a nice relaxing break on the beach. The Joes then run to join Serpentor, who they have been ordered to assist, and they establish that Serpentor will not be the commanding officer of this engagement. He will not be giving the Joes any orders of any kind. That will be Hawk. And we also briefly cut back to the recon team in the tower, and we see through their perspective Cobra Commander calling in all of his Mambas for air support. And things are looking pretty dicey for the Joe planes until Serpentor brings in his Rattler squadron and starts taking back the skies. Back on the ground, we see the two armies charge each other, and they have a quick infantry battle, which is suddenly ended by the lightning-fast emergence of Destro, who quickly takes the skies, completely runs over the airstrip, and he sends Cobra Commander and Serpentor to opposite ends of the island, licking their wounds. We then see that Destro has decided to take the air tower and use it as his tactical base, but the recon team makes it out into a sewer, but the sewer is being searched by Iron Grenadiers and flooded, so they have to find another way out. And that way out just happens to be through a sluice tunnel in the sewer. We then cut to Cobra Commander, who has decided to try to use his spy bat to see what Serpentor is up to, but before the feed goes live, Serpentor notices the camera and destroys the bat. We then see Hawk call the USS Flag and ask for reinforcements. And as fresh Joes prepare to take off, we see one of the stealth fighters on the Flag take off to destroy the Cobra's electronic defense radar. And as that's happening, we see that Cobra Commander, these new Joes are going to flank Cobra Commander and route him into Destro's army. And the stealth fighter is able to successfully destroy the radar systems, leaving Cobra Commander blind as the Joes assault the Cobra Commander's western flanks. The western flanks that Cobra Commander has just pulled all of his troops off of to deal with Serpentor and the Joes' assault from the east. So on the front lines, we see Zartan run off, and back on the boat within the western flank of the island, we see the Joes are about to join the main fight, and that they're rolling in some heavy armor. But first, they see Destro's tanks and planes and everything rolling into the fight. And as everything goes wrong for Cobra Commander, he is frozen in a moment of indecision. So Zartan jumps into action, gaining some high ground, drawing his bow, and shooting an arrow through Serpentor's head. And basically immediately after Serpentor's death, Dr. Mindbender goes running to Cobra Commander trying to make a deal with him, which Cobra Commander actually accepts. Then Destro rolls up and says that all he wants is the Baroness, and then he will leave. So the Joes are asked to leave Cobra Island, and since they struck a deal with Serpentor, who is no longer alive, they're somewhat legally obligated to do so. So next we see a tomahawk touchdown on the beach, and the wounded Joes are starting to be loaded into the helicopter. But while the cleanup continues, Zorana and Lady J have a quick little brawl, which lasts just long enough for the recon team to reunite with the rest of the Joes. Eventually, Zorana and Lady J are separated, and after all the wounded are loaded into the Tomahawks, Hawk takes Roadblock and heads to the Pentagon, and on Destro's cruise ship, we see that Destro and Baroness are just kind of chilling and tanning in the middle of the Gulf, and Baroness tells Destro that Cobra Commander is an imposter named Fred 7. And back on the island, we see that Dr. Mindbender has put Serpentor's body on ice to be used later. Alright, so that's the story. And overall, it's almost really good. You get some really interesting ideas, you get some cool visuals, some cool combat scenes, but it's just not, it's just stupid at the end of the day. The Joes are kind of just told to leave Cobra Island at the end, and they just sort of do, for no real reason. Like, this would be a prime opportunity to take out all of Cobra. Like, they could just end the fight right here. And they don't. And Cobra Commander should absolutely not be letting Dr. Mindbender rejoin his team. Fred 7 should just be executing Dr. Mindbender. There's no reason for him to... There's no reason to really have him be accepted back with good graces. He just sort of is. And for a lot of those, like, sort of story reasons, I do genuinely think this is just a dumb story. Even though it starts off really cool. Those first two issues, I went over them kind of fast in this video, but those first two issues with the Star Viper, really cool. And I also don't know where the Star Viper went, because, fun fact, he's never in the comic again. I don't know why. He was, I thought that was a really cool concept. Kind of overpowered, that's probably why he's not in the comic anymore. But I did really like him. It was a cool concept for them to play with. Another cool concept that existed in one issue of this, funnily enough, the issue that Marshall Rogers drew, you actually had you actually had Duke leading the team of Joes, instead of just having it be Hawk leading everybody all the time. And that's a concept that I always like, because that was a concept that was introduced right away when Duke was introduced and Hawk was promoted to General. And that was a concept that I really liked, that the comic just shortly abandoned when the General Hawk action figure came out, and they had to start including Hawk in the comic again. So overall, I do think this story is pretty good. I like Destro in this story a lot. He just he shows up, he launches this whole military campaign, ultra successful military campaign, by the way. He could have flattened G.I. Joe and Cobra if he wanted to. And then he just he gets the Baroness back and he just dips. And man, that's just funny to me. He's just like, he cares about Baroness so much, and that's kind of just an endearing Destro moment. Overall, I do think this story is pretty good. Like I said, it's just a little stupid. Serpentor just getting shot by Zartan is kind of a lame way for him to die. And then, honestly, Zartan and the Dreadnoks really should be written out of the comic at this point. There's no reason they should still be here. Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow should have killed Zartan by now. But that's a long time gripe of mine about this comic, is why are the Dreadnoks still alive? But yeah, that's really all I've got to say on this story. Overall, I would recommend the story, but you really do need to be reading to have read most of the G.I. Joe comic up to this point, or it's really just not going to make sense. And that is a general problem that I have with the G.I. Joe comic. You need to be so hyper informed about G.I. Joe. You have to have read most of the issues prior to it, and the comic wasn't that way at the beginning. So it's kind of a shame to see what happened to it as the comic went on. But yeah, really that's all I've got to say on this story. Would recommend the entire series, honestly. But yeah. So yeah, that's really all I've got today. So I'm just another guy named James. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.